Hello and welcome back to Education on Fire. Thank you so much for being here. If you are live, do say hello in the chat. We'll love to bring those up and say hello to you. If you have any questions as the show goes on, you can do that. If you watch on the replay, thank you so much for that as well. Do put something in the comments. We can always go backwards and forth and have that conversation there as well. So however you're watching, always really brilliant to have you here, and I do appreciate it. Best wishes to Andrew, who we had on last week. I know he had his big sing. I hope that went well, Andrew. If you get to watch this, I'm really interested to see how it came about. As a musician, as we were talking last week, it's such an important thing, I think, for children to have that opportunity. And we'll probably touch on well-being a little bit today, and certainly that sense of actually how your life is makes you well and as part of your being, rather than some of the sort of things that we put in place once you're already not feeling well. But that's a whole under the podcast, and maybe a little bit of topic that we can cover as well. So just in case you didn't grab the podcast this week, I decided that after sort of doing the Gare Grace Gets Gritty season, I wasn't quite sure how to summarize. Obviously, last week we did sort of an AI sort of summary as a whole thing, but I wanted to sort of give my thoughts on it. And in the end, what I decided to do was just have a conversation about how that worked and how I related to it in terms of my career, in terms of how I started learning. So obviously, as a musician, I talked about the whole idea of only being able to know what you can only do what you aspire to, the things that you actually experience, the things that you're going to know about. And so for me, that was about the opportunity to learn an instrument. It was the opportunity to have funded lessons, having a whole community around me to help me kind of really take those opportunities and see the next stepping stone, the next door that was opened in order for me to go from one band to an orchestra, to be able to see people a few years older than me go to music college and then into the profession, and actually understanding all those things. So I tried to sort of tailor how all those things sort of manifested from my point of view, and how that then fitted with some of the key points that Gare and I had talked about over the last sort of 7 episodes or so. So I'll be really interested to hear what you think about that, if you could relate to any of those things. Always a really, really fascinating thought process. If you're not on the mailing list, please do have a little look at that. There's 10 resources that we give you away as a PDF, which is kind of certain things that various guests have been on. They're kind of a wide-ranging thing, but the real reason to get on board is to make sure that you stay in touch with everything that's going on. And as I mentioned before, Gare's going to come back for a live session where we're going to, once we've finished all 10 episodes of that season, he's going to be live doing some Q&A and giving you the chance to be in the room as part of that thing. So yeah, if you go to educationonfire.com, that obviously gives you everything that you need, and you can be part of all of those things as well. So it'd be great to have you in the Zoom room as part of this sort of live conversation when that happens. So yeah, thanks very much for being involved, those people who've already expressed their interest. The other thing I just wanted to mention before we get going, the National Association for Primary Education has their conference for reading coming up in May. So we're going to be doing this for the people who are part of Bedfordshire University. So those students are going to get some great stuff as well. But also, if you're a local teacher, if you're in a school locally as well, or even further afield for that matter, do come along. If you go to educationonfire.com/reading, there it gives you this webpage. It gives you a whole load of information as well, how you can book, some of the people that are going to be speaking, all that sort of stuff is all there. So just do go and check that out. It's going to be a really, really fascinating day, and look forward to people who are going to be involved in that. And always great to actually have students as well. One of the things that we're looking to do is to be able to support students once they're sort of in their sort of first year, that sort of early career, because I think while you have some of the professional learning that goes on, maybe you've just got questions about the day-to-day life, how you sort of approach people, how that sort of community aspect works when you're a new person going into a school. So we're going to try and develop some sessions that are going to support people on that as well. So that will be a really, really sort of fascinating way of developing our sort of working with universities and some of the conferences we've got come up and already actually being planned over the next couple of years as well. So today I'm going to be chatting to Dr. Tej Samani, and we're going to be talking about the work that he does in terms of performance learning. But I think more importantly, we're going to be talking about some of the key themes that we talk about here on Education on Fire, and namely the sense of, where is education now? What are we going to be looking at going forward? The whole idea of AI, how that's going to be affecting education, how we think about it, how we're actually going to be putting it into schools in terms of teachers, and how it's going to work for students as well. So if you're ready and willing and able, Tej, we're going to be joining me absolutely now, and really appreciate him joining me today. So yeah, welcome to the show. Thank you very much indeed.
Thanks, Mark. Lovely to be here. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely, my pleasure. So why don't we just start off in terms of performance learning for people who haven't come across that? Just give us a snapshot of what that is and how it came about, and then we'll sort of reverse engineer it back into that general conversation, like we said, about education.
So, God, where do I begin? So I started performance learning 15 years ago, and well, mentally in my head, I started it over 25 years ago when I was that kid in school who just spent most of my time outside of the school classrooms, getting kicked out of school, and really not understanding why. Joke about I spent most of my kind of childhood and teenage years fighting my teachers, and now I'm spending most of my adulthood apologizing to them because I discovered a certain thing called a mirror. For me, this was all set up really to look at three key areas. Area number one, why kids like me when I was in school just did not win in school, and how? What was going on in my head? Because my escape route was really professional tennis. I left school at 16. I competed as an ATP touring pro, and the difference in sort of discipline, structure, mindset from just being really quite misbehaved, not getting it in school, spending all my time outside of classrooms, detention after detention, to playing professional tennis next to some of the world's greats within the space of getting, politically correct way of putting this is being told to leave at 15, and we're not going to have you back for your A levels. Best you find to do something else, to then getting up at 4:45 in the morning and training till 9 at night. What happened? What was the real difference? And then that led me to kind of realization number two, that is there a big difference between teaching someone and coaching someone? And then number three, what is the most sustainable and transferable way to uplift pupil performance, especially pupils like me, who, let's face it, if you put the area of a trapezium in front of them, I'd just get a phobic response. I wouldn't be able, I couldn't do it. Times tables, fractions, algebra, how many wives Henry VIII had, the process of photosynthesis, all that day in, day out was causing me so much stress and overwhelm that I just didn't get it. I didn't get the point. I didn't get why I couldn't do it. And you know this, Mark, you remember this when you were in school. You're sitting in a class with 30 kids, 25 of them get it, and you're in that small group just going, I have the same fingers, toes, I breathe oxygen. Why? What is going on from when the teacher is teaching me to the point where the information's here and my brain's going, And that was point number three, that I then became obsessed really with finding out the answer to this one question. And that's the premise of performance learning 20 odd years later, which is the most sustainable and transferable way to uplift pupil performance teaching more of what to learn, or teaching people how to learn? And for me, I fell in love with this mission on building a technology, a pedagogy, to be able to go into schools to say, somewhat ambitiously, 15 years ago, you grow up, right? Give me your toughest kids, right? The kids who are not turning up, the kids who are just, you're absent constantly, who are inner city kids, coastal, rural. 300 odd schools later, I've been up and down the country like a yo-yo, and I think I've seen everything now. And could we turn them around in the space of 2 terms? Could we double, triple their exam results? And that's what started the business, is a coaching program that I created, going into the toughest schools in the country and really helping hard to reach year 10s and 11s get better exam results. So in a nutshell, long-winded answer, performance learning is an assessment technology and a learning technology, as well as a coaching program that schools use and parents use at home to be able to first assess how a student learns. That's a 20-minute assessment we have, which then, in essence, matches based on 4 skills: how they manage their time, their sleep, how they retain and recall information, because all our listeners today, let's face it, how many of us woke up this morning and thought they could sleep for another 3 months? And then their ability to diffuse stress and anxiety towards tests and exams. And our system correlates that to learning resources. And the child every week just begins to really improve, like I said, three key areas: how they behave, their skill set, and how they see themselves. And all my life's research, Mark, has really been correlating these sort of, and forgive me, I don't like to use this terminology, but I'll use it, but soft skills, the subtle differences in a child that we don't really pick up in mainstream academia or mainstream data, and using that to really predict exam results, but then close gaps. So the vision for performance learning over the last 15 years is to really put the pupil at the forefront of their own data and agency, but to be able to, as sustainably, and I don't, we tend to shy away from the word quick in education. But if I'm a year 11 student right now in March and I have exams in 50 odd days, I need to turn those results around quickly. So we adopt a framework, and we teach a framework that teaches pupils to do that.
And I guess that's the key thing, isn't it? Because, like I say, if you're aware of this and you're thinking and you're going through this earlier on, then you hit the March of your GCSE year with that kind of, I've got a much better idea of who I am, how I learn, and what I'm going to do, and how that's going to work. And you sort of mentioned
Yeah.
that sense of sort of being engaged and those sorts of things. And I certainly remember from when I was at school, there were two things that sort of struck me as you were saying that. The first is, as a musician, I absolutely loved everything musical that was going on in school, whether that was a music lesson, it was a wind band rehearsal, it was my individual lessons, it was the fact I was going to go home afterwards and practice, and then there was going to be a
Mm,
rehearsal. I had structure and a reason
mm,
for doing those things.
mm.
The more academic side, I wish I'd known during that time, just purely because as I then became a professional, that sense to be able to write well, to understand numbers, to put something together as
Right.
I start to grow in my business. And that's why I love the project-based learning idea, because all those things would have
Yeah.
been relevant to me in school. And I would have gone, yeah, I now get that. I can see why that's important, as opposed to, like you said, 30 kids in a class and 25 seem to get it, or I was one of those that got it last year, but this year for some reason I seem to have missed that kind of latest memo when the whole thing's gone up a little notch as well. And so I find that fascinating, and I also find that sense of what you get with yourself and what you understand with yourself. I always think back to my art classes, and for some reason I'd see that and think, well, I'm creative, the arts is something I'm into. I'd try and draw something, I'd see it in my head and thought, well, it'll just go like this, and I'd do like half a dozen lines to start to get the whole thing going, and go, that's not what's in my head. There's a disconnect there between what I'm seeing, what I'm learning, what I think I've been taught, and how I'm able to sort of produce that. And I see that for lots of pupils that I teach, in depending on what that subject matter is. So they might be great at art, but there's something within, whether it's English or maths or whatever the subject happens to be, where there's, like I felt in art, there's a disconnect between what I thought I could do, what I could understand, but actually being able to regenerate it in whatever form that happens to be. I see it when I'm teaching music. It's that kind of, I don't understand sometimes why this pupil's not able to get this particular thing when it seems obvious to me, or also sometimes more importantly, why they were unable to do it last week but not this week, or they were able to do it 5 minutes ago. And so the sorts of things that you're talking about, they've been able to dive into more about them and how they learn, what they see, what they understand, what they process, and how they do that. I then start to go, oh, now I understand all of the answers to some of those questions, and it's a really sort of fascinating one for me in how that goes, and it just becomes very personalized very quickly. And just one sort of final thing on that is the fact that I get very excited about that, but I often see my pupils for half an hour a week, and then they go back into the norm, so to speak. And I teach in some great schools, but it becomes the norm, and I'm there saying, yeah, but it can be like this, and the things that you were talking about, how this can really help you in life. And then, but like I say, you're half an hour a week or so compared to the hours and hours of everything else that goes on. It's quite hard to keep that momentum, which is why I really love the way that you work and how you're able to present those things. Hi, Tej. I'm just going to jump back in. I think your audio isn't coming through, so I'm just going to just check and see why that might be. If you're in the comments or you're watching, do let us know whether that seems to have just given out, and I can try and do something
Is it?
our end. Yes, we're back on. We're back on. Let me,
Okay, don't know what happened there.
whatever that was. It's
Yeah,
one of the great things about being live.
live, right? Can you hear me now? Perfect. So yeah, for me, it's so the point I was trying to make is more often than not, a pupil who's sort of hard to reach. If we break that down into why is this pupil hard to reach, there's obviously environmental factors, but time and time again, when they're given the context, here's why we're doing this and here's how to do it, specifically with the how, and they're really taught how to learn, and they have equal or even more opportunity to focus on how to learn and build that skill set. That's time and time again, the light, except that light switches on, and they're not sitting in class just blaming themselves and thinking, why me? And even worse, this isn't right for me, so I'm just going to excuse myself. Because there's only so much, as adults, there's only so much stress we can handle until that's it, finished. I'm taking myself out of the equation. I've had enough. And more often than not, that's what tends to happen with students in class who just don't get it. It's not all of a sudden they've turned up to year 10 and year 11 and something's happened and they've not got it. This has been compounded since the transition years, and in some cases as early as primary school. And because there is no real estate in the curriculum to teach a child how to learn, they just jump into what to learn. You either get it, and if you get it, you're okay. But if you don't, what happens? Struggle, 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 stress, stress, stress. And this is what I found time and time again. And there's patterns to this, that once you help a child or a student realize those patterns, see those patterns, and really help them to build their own agency, teach them how to regulate, teach them how to be aware of their own metacognition, their own skill sets, change can happen very quickly.
And we're going to talk about, the way the system works now, because it makes so much sense. Like you said, it's about what you learn rather than how you learn. And in the current climate and the way that the future obviously looks, even in the immediacy, the how you learn and how you communicate and how you understand yourself, and those, as you said, those sort of soft skills are going to be the things which are going to be the most supportive going forward, because the knowledge based things, we know that it's out there, it's in your pocket, it's there. So I think everybody knows it needs to be different, but no one's sure either how to do it, or the people that do know how to do it don't have the position, aren't in the position to do it. There's a financial reason, there's a political reason, there's the 5 year of parliament. All of those things make a difference. So with that having been said, can you see a way for that to make a difference? Or do you think now, because of the way education can be framed and where you can get this information from, and the fact that you're someone who's able to help so many pupils, that taking ownership yourself, with families listening, or teachers, or even older pupils, they're like, I don't think I'm getting it. I can feel the struggle that I am within that school system, but I am going to take ownership and actually make the most of it, because I actually believe that is the way forward, despite maybe the restrictions that I'm feeling. And like you said, you're a perfect example of knowing both sides of those coins.
So it's interesting because one of the, and I think it's too easy to sit here and criticize our education system. Ultimately, we're providing quite significantly on scale access, but the level of needs and complexity that's created, and as a result of that, the the diversity of our population, the diversity of needs, and also the onset of AI and technology, you're building what is hopefully not going to be a perfect storm, but could be one of the biggest opportunities for education reform in a lifetime. And I really believe that, if we are open and humble enough to be able to admit that the current system works for the ones who get it, but for the ones who don't, doesn't at all. And from my experience, this change starts to happen and needs to start to happen if we're operating on the current sort of like we're most students are working towards GCSEs and A levels. within the transition years and really building in. And I would urge parents, especially listening to this, if there are any, and even educators, that one of the best things we can do is really look at that gap in the transition years, means years 7, 8, and 9, where there is a little bit of affordability on time to be able to build in some real estate within the curriculum that is purely focused on skill development and sort of what I call kind of agency development. So it's not just about getting through more history, more math, more science, more English within those critical years. And that's where I think we need to borrow time away from our current MO and be able to say, how do we use these 3 years to really blanket? And if I had a magic wand and I could wave it across the entire country, it would be to teach every year 7, 8, and 9 child how to learn and teach them about themselves. And the amount that would save in terms of attendance, special educational needs, difficulty in learning, but mostly in terms of correlating that to attainment and uplift, would be significant. We've proven that within performance learning, that when you just take a kid out for an hour a week and teach that child how to learn, they've doubled their exam results in 2 terms. And we've done this now thousands and thousands of times, proven it in sort of independent research across now 4 universities. Imagine if we scaled that up across those transition years. And to me, that's where often parents who are listening is, one, it's never too late. Two, these are skills. And the wonderful thing about teaching skills is once you've learned it, you've learned it. So certainly for me, Mark, is looking at this almost as a code, almost like it as a learning code, to be able to say, my child is struggling just because they haven't cracked that code. And it is a code. As opposed to thinking there's this big elephant in the room and it's a mountain we need to climb, because often that mountain just grows and grows and grows. The later we leave it, the more overwhelmed the pupil feels, the child feels.
I completely can understand that, and I hope people listening find that opportunity to be able to think in those terms, because I think then, like you say, everything seems achievable. And the one thing we know is it's only about now, it's only about today. We were talking before we came on air that there's a million things we'd like to do in a whole kind of project that we might want to get involved in, but we've got certain things we've got to focus on. There's only a certain number of hours in the day. But when you realize that you have the skill set and the understanding to be able to work those things through, then when you then put your mind to it, it is possible, as opposed to this is completely out of my reach, which kind of brings me around to that whole set of what is attainable for people. So you put there so well that sense that with these skills and this understanding, your actual attainment can increase, because what the standard is, whatever that GCSE grade is that you need to have, whether it's a 5 or whatever in certain subjects, or if you want to have your sort of A star to go to a certain university for your A level.
Yeah.
There's a way to actually play the system, as in get the best you can within the system that we have. How do you sort of frame that for people who need to see that their attainment win isn't necessarily getting that 9, or isn't necessarily getting that A star, but actually is still supporting them in their life and gives them the best start in life as they sort of move beyond school and into sort of work or whatever their next stage looks like?
So this really all comes down to, and it's a great question. This really all comes down to, I forget, it may not be the best way to put it, but sort of using assessment and really redefining assessment early on. And I think if we can begin to start to identify sort of natural talent, natural skill sets early on in the child's journey. Do I like building things? Do I like to use my hands? Do I like numbers? Do I like organizing things? Do I like administrative activities? Do I want to get into music? Do I want to get into what do I enjoy as an individual? And then working backwards to be able to say, how do we get you really good at what you enjoy from a skills perspective that is employable? Whole different debate about what's employable now, what's going to be employable in 3 years from now, let alone 13 to 15 years from now. But it's the context that's often missing. It's going from history to math to science to English. and often the kids who are not like me when I was in school, which for me it was all about sport and tennis and this dream of becoming a professional tennis player, was completely the opposite to what I was experiencing in school. So if we can begin to start to look at how do we assess entrepreneurship, how do we assess skills that industry value early on, not too early on, but early on in a child's education where they can begin to really identify what they see themselves as being, what they think they could do as an adult, and then reverse engineering that in their educational experience. Because they'll have the vision then, or at least part of the vision of here's why I'm doing this. This is going to one day help me get to X. Especially for the ones who, like me in school, were at that bottom end of the academic spectrum and were struggling, just didn't see the point. So for your kind of fives and belows who are not just waking up and knocking out eights and nines in their sleep and wondering and scraping through and stressing through the whole thing, really understanding, look, this is a stepping stone. This is a moment in time that if you nail this, it is less so about remembering photosynthesis, but more so proving to yourself that you have the discipline to do something you don't necessarily enjoy. And it's equipping those values early on and those behaviors early on that I think we need to talk more about at a policy level, but also at a framing level in the classroom. So, and forgive me if I'm just repeating myself. So the child gets the context of why and what it's going to give them the older they get in life.
And I think the context is a really important thing. It's something we definitely talked about, or Gary and I did on our recent series, because it was that kind of, if it's relevant to what I know and understand in my local community, then it makes sense. I mean, I think we were speaking, one of the things was about learning a foreign language. And
Yeah.
so when he was on the sort of the northern side of England and sort of the east coast, then that kind of, you know, Dutch or German or something like that is more probably something which is going to be helpful and supportive and something where you
Mm.
might travel to, as opposed to if you're living in Kent. And actually French makes perfect sense because you're likely to hop across the channel and do that. Not that you
Yeah.
shouldn't do one or the other, but it
Yeah.
you know, it kind of makes sense. You might be speaking to someone who's sort of in that particular way.
Yeah.
It's a little bit like the technology idea. You know, the no technology is one thing, but without any technology, then you're not able to deliver what you're doing. So the sort of baby in the bathwater conversation
It
is a
completely. It completely.
is a really big one.
Yeah. And so it's a really interesting point because every time either a school or a parent adopts what we do, we send workbooks. So it is this constant balancing act between use technology effectively, use it to empower you, but don't let it run you or own you.
Well, I think that's key, isn't it? You know, it's a tool, and as soon as you see it as a tool, then that's the key.
Yeah.
And I had a sort of a version of that today when I was teaching somebody, and they were talking about earplugs, and you know, someone told me that I need to wear earplugs when I'm playing the drums, and so I just broadened it out and said, you know, is when you're playing the drums, you know, does the drum actually make a sound? And it's like, well, no, the drum doesn't make anything. No, it's when you hit it, how hard you hit it, what the size of the room is, what it is that you're playing. So yes, if you need them, then of course you should wear them. And I said, you know, I wear mine all the time, but I'm in the room for many hours a day. You're coming for a half an hour lesson. You know, we try and gear what we play in a certain sort of dynamic level with an understanding of that. So it's not that you should or shouldn't, it's that you're doing it with purpose and understanding. And the same thing with technology. You know, you've got a phone in your pocket or you're going to have it elsewhere. So technology is with us whether you like
Mm.
it or not. When it's just sat on the table, it's not doing
Mm.
anything. If you're
Mm.
using it to socialize in a positive way and you're able to organize study groups, if you want to take it down that sort of study option, that's one thing. If you're literally spending 5 hours a night on TikTok, maybe it's not so much of a
Mm.
a good use of your time. So it's kind of like you say, people understanding the way they're using the tools and why they're using it and how they're coming about it is really more important than let's just get rid of the whole thing altogether.
It completely, especially to younger generations who, I mean, you and I haven't grown up with this. I'm pointing because my phone's here. We haven't grown up with it to an extent. Whereas most of our kids in school today, this is what they're growing up with. And now fast track that to 5 years from now, when especially with a lot of the rhetoric around software and how that's going to be delivered is, you know, imagine your 6-year-old child having a relationship continuously and consistently with an AI agent. How do I do my homework? What do I need to do today? What time is school? Where's my school timetable? It's shifting significantly and it's shifting quickly. And unless we begin to start to teach pupils really how to learn about themselves, their own agency, how they perceive the world, emotional resilience, emotional management, really getting this and this on the curriculum as equal or even more important in some cases than history and geography, because this is about teaching them about themselves. I just We're addicted to TikTok today. It's one of the significant rises in mental health challenges. We know this, it's old news. Social media is more often than not can do more damage to a young, impressionable mind than make it more empowering. So, you know, this is something I've been speaking about for nearly 15 years. It's now, to me, getting to a point of crisis that we really need to start embedding frameworks and opening dialogue and questions in classrooms, in school, about who are you as an individual? How are you learning? How do you see yourselves? To be able to start to build that emotional resilience that is required.
And so much of that, which I think you sort of alluded to there, is the fact that it's a conversation with everybody. It's not about
Mm.
me and you deciding we think this is the way forward. It's about me and you having a conversation with this group of children who, because then I learn something, you learn something, they learn something. Like say, my views on phones and technology is based on my standpoint of my age and my experience.
Yeah,
Like
in
you
your
say,
context.
yeah, exactly. The younger people who are like, well, this is just part of my life. The reason the 2 and 3 year olds don't hold a book but do try and swipe the page and wonder why it doesn't
Exactly.
work.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
that's just the way it is. So I think having that dialogue with everybody in there, and I think every young person also wants to live their best life, and they want to feel like they're supported, and they want ownership of what they're doing. And I think that being able to let's put those safeguards around, let's build a structure, let's do something where you're taking ownership of how we're going to use this as well. Because all of those skills, like you say, we don't know what it's going to look like from a technology point of view in 5 years' time. But if you know how to go about organizing your life and having these conversations and how it fits with your community, whether it's family, school, work, then it's just going to be a version of the same thing, and you're already in that position of being malleable and thinking about you can adjust, you can do whatever you like because it will fit at the right time in the right way as you go forward. And I think that takes a lot of anxiety away about everything that's going on in and around you, and the fact that you've, like you said, you've got ownership then of what you're trying to do.
Completely agreed. Totally. Taking the words right out of my mouth.
I'm curious in terms of, you like say you have this company, you are able to support people. How easy is it to get people on board? Obviously, we're talking about it, it sounds like why would you not just jump on and do it? But that's very different than the fact that it could be in every school, it could be in every home. How
Mm.
does that sort of conversation go from your point of view, and how easy is that to sort of people to really understand that? And does the fact that, like you said, your own journey have an impact? Is someone who's said you were failing at school and has sat here as a doctor, as someone who engaged in life through being a sports, with tennis is something that you really understood as opposed to an academic side. Does that sort of thing sort of help people understand that sort of perspective?
So it's interesting because we've sort of deployed and delivered this to kind of various different audiences, and certainly within schools and within, if you take secondary schools, um, the focus predominantly and how we've managed to grow is really on focusing on the ones that are quite hard to reach as step one. Who are your year 10s and year 11s who are struggling right now and struggling academically? The way we've survived is to be able to correlate, and this is what I did my thesis in, to correlate pupil voice and correlate that quite highly to predicting exam results. And then number two, correlating our skills curriculum and how we deploy that to exam results. So it's enabled and helped often the more sort of I've been there, seen it all. I don't want to say sort of more cautiously optimistic schools, but still cautious. Be able to say actually we can see within 3 4 hours of coaching how this child is now engaging more, producing more work, and as a result of that, can see how this is going to help. But really, the core of what we're trying to do is really redefine how schools are using assessments. And our core sort of pillar in all of this is you're only as good as what you're assessing. Now, in business, we know this. If you can't, you can't track it, you can't measure it, you can't project it, you can't really forecast it. It's the same with a child, that it's all well and good looking at a previous, key stage 3 result, previous predicted exam result, previous practice paper. But how were they when they sat down? What was their relationship like with the information in front of them? Were they having a good day? Were they having a bad day? And when you're looking at professional athletes, all of this is assessed. Yet a child's predictions are based on the previous set of exam results. And then that sets a trajectory and a pathway for that child, which then instills a mindset. I'm a level 5 student. I'm a level 6 student. I got a C. I'm working to immediate mindset. And then they begin to form an identity. And then don't even get me started with the amount of labeling around ADHD and ADD and learning difficulties, right? So they carry that with them. And time again, we've managed to snap that in half by just teaching them how a level 9 student learns information. And anyone can learn a skill. They may not be 100% at executing it, but they can learn a skill. And if they can get to 70, 80% proficiency in the skills, their exam results improve, their relationship with their subjects improve. And I say this all the time. I've yet met this is one of the reasons, and I realized this when I was playing tennis, that I'm happy when I win. I'm miserable when I lose. It's binary. It's as simple as that, right? So win more, right? And simple, right? And that, we can get into it, it's about taking part, participating. But for the child, if they're capped at a level 3, it's not about saying, let's get you to a level 9 and you have to get it, and that's what success. No. For that child, it may be, how do we break that barrier in your mind in terms of how you are understanding, applying, analyzing information, structuring, retaining it? Because if you've never been taught how can you honestly say that the potential of that child is capped at that level when we haven't taught them how? And that's what frustrates me and has kept me up at night, is to say, well, looking at previous exam results, looking at previous practice papers, looking at really that as the forefront of how that, and then the set system in schools without really teaching them the skills they need to survive and thrive, I think is an injustice to every struggling child in the country right now. Because they can do it if they're taught how. We've seen this time and time again. And that's what often I bang my head against the wall. So kind of deviated there. But being able to educate schools and work with schools, and we've worked with and do work with, and we're very just privileged around this. Some amazing schools, amazing teachers, tirelessly striving every day to be able to get their kids through the line. But to be able to actually, let's just pause for a minute. I know they're struggling in science, English, and maths. But let's not assess that area. Let's look at how they're approaching their work. Let's look at how many hours of sleep they're getting. Let's look at how they're perceiving themselves. Let's look at their relationship with how they manage overwhelm, because it's all that stuff that's happening beneath the surface that is dictating how they show up to lessons. And that's been the sort of the eye opener, really. And that's what we've, in our small business, been able to bring to the table to say, all the other stuff that we've been doing for the last 50, 60 years is great. But we now need to shift how we're assessing pupils and using this data to be able to embed that within your day-to-day practice. Because we feed the results back to students. We have them do an assessment, they get a report, and we go, is this you? And immediately the accountability's gone up. Yeah, this is me. This is and I feel heard. And actually, I'm not being tested on how to solve an area of a trapezium. I'm being asked about how I feel and my approach. So getting the pupil to understand actually how you feel and your approach to this is mission critical to your success in this, they've started to show up more. And then last but not least, with the pupil, especially with the ones who are not that engaged, is giving them a framework where they can, some of the stuff we teach is like, here's a page of information. I'm going to show you how to learn it in 20 minutes as opposed to 2 hours. And it just breaks down that belief that this revision guide, this piece of text is going to take me 3-4 hours of revision to be able to learn.
I really love that sense of the overseeing idea that you're able to explain there about what's important, because we've talked about how and why and the importance of it all, but like you say, the actual getting people to engage with you is the most important thing to begin with in order to have those other conversations. So we're probably preaching to the converted already for those people like, yeah, absolutely, I completely understand that, let's start there with all of those conversations. Whereas every school wants better attainment and better achievement, because that affects how they're looked at, how they're perceived, their league table, all of that sort of stuff. Whether you think
and
it's
the
right
child
or wrong.
deserves it.
Yeah,
they deserve to finish school. Sorry to interrupt you. They deserve to finish school in their GCSEs and goes, I nailed it.
Yeah,
I did it. I don't necessarily get it. I'm probably not going to be a biology teacher or a history teacher, but it's not for me. But I did it.
Yeah, and I think being able to meet people like that, and I like what you said there about the student, that kind of, I thought this was going to take me 3 hours to learn, and now I can do it in 20 minutes, so I've immediately got your attention, and we've solved that immediate problem, whether it's the actual learning or whether it's the perception of the learning. And then, like say, once you're involved at that point, the rest of that stuff can filter through in a way that makes sense, and like I say, you're all set up to be able to do that. And I love that sort of sense of those two things working hand in hand, and how it makes a difference as it goes through. And just on the point of data, we know that there's data all the time in everything that we do in this day and age. How wonderful to think that it's a positive thing. I'm taking this assessment, it's not the end of the world, it's not my final one day of A-level or my final GCSE, and I'm going to do it, I could do it tomorrow and the day after and the day after, and then I've got this whole picture of what I'm doing, and I then know how it works. And yeah, in the same way that every company wants all your data, because they want to know what you like and what you don't like and how you do this, and it's happening all the time anyway, so to sort of have control of it and actually make it work for you seems a very empowering thing to do as well.
And look, we wanted to make it fun, and time again, and I'm traveling 4 hours up to the different part of the country tomorrow to work with a group of year 11s. And part of the process is taking them through the assessments. And it's really interesting when you watch them in a room doing the assessments, and like, that's me. Yeah, no, I feel that. No, I'm turning up like this. And to me, that's, again, it makes my hair rise, because one, that's obviously I'm biased, so I do what I do and built this. But getting a child to really get excited about reflecting on who they are and how they learn, and surely that's the purpose of school, right? It's for them to be able to go, actually, I learned about me, and if I can correlate that to schoolwork, and it just begins to open even the most closed, child to be able to actually, it's not the textbook. It's because you haven't been taught how to learn the textbook. It's not me. No, it's not you. And it doesn't necessarily mean you're going to get 9s in a week. It's not about that. But you will walk into class feeling happier, more in control, and you'll be the kid putting your hand up, going, actually, I know the answer to that question. And just chip away at that. And that's why I think start it in year 7 and 8, because so many problems will be solved by the time we get to year 10 and 11. And more importantly, yes, league tables, yes, academic results, but don't, and I ask parents this question, and it's a question we don't really ask in school, that if you had a choice to create a happy child but who failed school, or a stressed out child who did well in school, which one would you choose? And often it would be, can I have a happy child who does well in school? And it's absolutely possible with just 3 things we need to tweak: the way we assess, teaching pupils how to learn, and really adopting a coaching methodology for the most hard to reach. For me, that's been the forefront of our brand and our mission over the last 15 years, is to say, actually, the happier you are, the more you win, the better you're going to turn up, the more you're going to show up. And let's not make this 100% about being about the subject. Let's make it about you and how you learn and how you turn up and how you approach and your skill set. And all of a sudden, they feel a lot more in control.
Yeah, I love that. And I know we said we wouldn't go down the rabbit hole of labels and ADHD and all that
Yeah.
sort of stuff. But there's one thing I want to ask you in 1 second about that. So we'll come back to
Okay, go on.
that. But for those people watching, if you do have a question or there's anything you want to mention, do just put it in the comments, and we can bring it up and chat about that, and mention that to you. If we just put it in the chat, I can bring it up on screen and we can see that and talk about it. So yeah, please feel free to do that if you want to. So yes, so the labeling side I'm interested in two ways. One, I think it's widely known that there seems to be more people that have been labelled officially or unofficially, as that is. And I'm interested into your take on why you think that might be. Is it just more people being assessed, environment, that kind of thing? And then also what that means in your experience with all the sort of information and skills that you have about how that changes a framework once someone's been diagnosed with whatever that supposedly that happens to be, and how that works with the way that you're doing the things you are with performance learning.
Yes. So I think certainly having access to special educational needs support is something that's grown, and hopefully with the reforms um, will continue to. And I think that's only a positive. I think just focusing on, and I'm quite clear on this in terms of our approach through performance learning, that ultimately, if one has been diagnosed with a learning difficulty, what do we then do next? Because often, if you've seen some of the greatest minds in history have had learning difficulties. And for me, it can be used as a, not to sound too washy, as a superpower. And being able to identify that with a pupil who is, I had one in our office the other day who we worked with, who is severely struggling with ADHD. And what we've found, we had another one, in fact, this morning, who's dyslexic. And what we've found is the process in which that individual learns, the speed in which they learn, the ability in which they learn, comes down to sort of kind of 7 key areas, which is what I teach about and talk about a lot. And if we can improve those 7 areas, we can't obviously make the learning difficulty vanish, but we can minimize its effect it has when it comes to learning key pieces of information. So for me, processing skills, structuring skills, application skills, retention skills, recollection skills, organizing skills, structuring skills, that certainly is, for me, the area of conversation pre and post diagnosis, because that's the bit we can control. That's the bit we can help a child get better at, speed up their process for. And that certainly is the focus of all of our work. And time again, the amount of pupils I've worked with who, great, we know that about you. You've had this diagnosis, but let's turbocharge the approach and the way and how you are learning so that we can minimize, not eliminate, minimize the effect that then has on you.
I can't tell you how pleased I am with the way you put that, because I have exactly that same conversation with some of my pupils. It was that sense of, some of them come in and they say, oh yes, but I've got this, or this is my case, or this is the reality of what's going on. And I say, okay, thanks for letting me know, because often that isn't necessarily what I know off the bat. But what's really brilliant is the fact that I'm then able to turn around and say, but look at all the things that you can do. I can't do that in some ways. You're able to read this in this particular way, or you can process stuff in a way that I can't. You're not able to do the way that I learn in that particular way. So that's brilliant for us, because we can talk about what works for you, what works for me, how I can teach you in a way that's going to be really, really supportive. And then, like you say, it almost just, it doesn't eliminate the diagnosis, but it kind of just makes it about you and me. It's about a human connection. It's about how we're going to learn. And I appreciate that's much easier, because I'm often teaching one-to-one. It's different if it's one-to-many. But I think just the way that you sort of so normalize that sense of, okay, this is where we are. Let's get all the support we can. Let's use it in a way that's going to be helpful, and let's move forward.
Yeah, exactly. And more often than not, in it's kind of the 7-step sequence, it's 2 or 3 of them that have just slowed down. It's fine tuning,
Yeah.
right? And it's shifting process. And most importantly, it's not getting it down to an identity level psychologically. I am this, and as a result, I'm slower.
And it makes such a big difference then, doesn't it, as well? So
Yeah.
it's really incredible to be able to chat in this way. I really
Likewise, Mark.
do
Thanks for having me on.
appreciate the, as is always the case with the podcast, it's like you can see a brilliant website, you can see a brilliant product, you can understand why it works, but then when you get that whole back
Mm,
human the way you talk, the why, the reason you do it, the passion for it, the kind of the story within it, you kind of, it just makes it kind of a reality, and it just becomes a normality. Even if we're talking about big subjects, we're talking about important things, it is a way for us to be able to kind of, like say, it's about a conversation, and also for people watching, you can do something about it, you know, have a phone call with someone, have a conversation with someone, open up the door in a way that you can, you know, frame what we've been talking about in a way that might be very, very sort of helpful for people. So
totally.
do look at the website, find out more information about how that works, whether you're an educator, whether you're a parent. I guess going to the website is the best place to start, and where you'd like people to go and have a
No,
look.
absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Anything we can do to help.
Brilliant. Well, Tej, thank you so much. I really do just appreciate
No, thanks,
your
Mark, for
time
having me.
and your just your passion and your wanting to help people in that way. And I know there are so many brilliant people out there doing the same thing, but
Yeah.
this podcast exists and these conversations exist just so that if people hadn't heard about one person or one particular way that people are helping, maybe it just opens a few doors or
Mm,
gives people a signpost to where
mm.
that goes. So yeah, thank you so much indeed. I really do
No,
appreciate
thank
your
you,
time,
Mark. Thanks,
and
everyone. I
lovely to
appreciate it.
speak to
Thanks
you
for
again
having me.
soon.
See ya.
So thank you so much for watching. As I
No,
said,
thanks, Mark. Hope that was all right.
fantastic. Thank you so much. So what we're going to do now is we're going to just pause for a second. I just want to talk to you one other thing about NAPE that we talked about while we were going through, and that is the Primary First Journal, which is now available. It's there as a download. It's the ability from what was a hard copy only to now having this digital version, so people can get it from wherever they are. So if you go to educationonfire.com/NAPE, it takes you to this particular site, and there you can download these latest Primary First journals. They're amazing. And I would just point you in that one for John Coe, which is the latest one, which John was one of the founding members of NAPE, died a couple of years ago. And we've put this journal together with lots of his old letters, his white papers, his workings, his thoughts, of various things that he did over his very long career. And I think so much of it still harks back to what we're talking about here, because at the end of the day, education hasn't changed at the heart. We want to support every child to learn in a way that's best for them and for them to thrive and for them to be able to enjoy life today in the way that's important, while understanding what that next step may be. So I do urge you to go and do that. I think the journal's £5. So it's an absolute no-brainer if you're interested in those things. And NAPE is a sponsor of the Education on Fire, has been for a long time, and I really do appreciate everything that they do. And I'm our vice chair as well, so I'm an integral part of what they're doing. They're not just sort of a name sponsor from that point of view. So do go and check that out as well. So yes, thank you so much indeed for everyone who was there watching. As I said, thanks for watching. Appreciate you very much. If you haven't subscribed to the channel, please do. Like the videos, go and support Tej and everything that he's done as well, because what we want to be able to do is to share all of these things. If you subscribe, you'll know when all the next videos are, and all those things are going to be listed as part of the live shows, and also as we release the podcasts as well, which are here on YouTube, but also on any platform that you watch as well. So yeah, thank you so much indeed. It's been an absolute privilege to be here again, and we'll be back with you again next week. Education is not the filling of a pail, but the lighting of a fire.